Welcome to Conscious Dominance, a DSRX studio production. These weekly conversations explore how to approach mindful leadership and inner dominance within the powerful container of committed, intentional relationships. Join Eric as he invites new dialogues, sharing practical insights for how the craft of consciousness opens the aperture to love, serve, and connect with unwavering presence.
Welcome to Conscious Dominance Podcast. I'm Eric. This is Rachael. Today we're diving deep into something that I might call invisible contracts or unconscious agreements that we all make with society, with the world at large, with our conditioning, and that these are about how they start influencing how we're allowed to receive, how we're allowed to feel good, and how we allow ourselves to even know what we owe the world. The issue with these unconscious contracts is that most people don't even know that they exist. By definition, unconscious means you don't know they exist. And yet they determine so much. Like they determine how much pleasure you're allowed to have, how much you're allowed to accept help, how much you're allowed to give, how much you're allowed to receive. And this accounts for both the men and the women. And as a conscious dom, you must start paying attention to this for your woman.
In essence, these unconscious programs are here by design to extract more from you than you get back. They're all forms where unconscious dominance can be pervasive, and they don't have your long-term vitality in mind. This was such a revelation being in relationship with Eric, where he helped me recognize and witness so many invisible contracts that I held and still hold with society about not receiving an equal balance of my own giving. I didn't know how pervasive this was because it sat dormant inside of me for years. So how could I feel guilty about receiving help when no one had ever really helped me with anything else before? I was an asshole, and I was this hyper independent. I was taught to be and praised for being highly capable and practiced. I didn't want to burden anyone with my details, and I lived alone, and I knew what I liked, and I was able to do it quickly and efficiently. So I wasn't out loud angry or disappointed or blaming anyone for that because they weren't doing that for me. It's more that I never imagined that could ever even be possible, that someone would stop to care and really study, take the time to learn what it is that I'm doing or why. So back to that question, no one was helping me because how could they? There was no room in my life for anyone to bring assistance or contribution. There was no space for anyone to enter my world.
And if they did,
I
you
felt
felt
guilty. Yeah, I owed them that power imbalance in a way felt like I needed to do more to make it fair. But when Eric could do things for me and guide me towards more and more moments where I was asked to be with that guilt and sit with it and feel it, regardless of what's happening, to be gentle with myself in that way and to really examine the guilt that after many years that this has been really hard for me, that I can feel a sort of guilty pleasure. I can feel what's forbidden in those moments when he treats me like a princess. That word was not thrown around our household in any sort of nice way or cute way. It was actually an insult in my family to be called that. And so to start feeling and calculating in myself that when we first started dating, I would feel that I needed to get him back, that if he gave to me, I would be in a space where I needed to return the favor. And I would notice that maybe in the shower, I was calculating, ooh, I'll make sure I do this for him tomorrow, or I'll make sure to buy him an extra special pastry at the store, or I'll treat him in this way, or I'll bring him pleasure in this little moment, or however it may be. And that this was a little contract that was inside my head in these in-between moments where I was receiving from him and also showing up to this way that I owed something. It's like tit for tat. These were moments of calculation, and those invisible contracts, if you will, was something that was in a tit for tat relationship with me and me. This wasn't a direction from him. This was more that unconscious, automatic, inside of myself programming. Now, once that became conscious, it was really hard to ignore and a little entertaining and definitely confronting.
Yeah, it was revelatory for me to watch you, a totally natural giver, massively skilled at taking care of everyone, and massively skilled at accommodating and trained to be a people pleaser. And you got really good at it. And I was saying, wait a second, no one's considering you in this situation, in this equation. No one was considering your health in this equation. No one was considering your long term. No one was trying to know who you were. No one's trying to understand you. And I came along and was like, this is fucked up that you're doing this, but I'm also noticing that all women are doing this. And what I'm also seeing is that you start noticing that it's very much a societal program to extract from women. It's programming around not just overgiving, but also around body image, also around workaholism. Society doesn't give a shit. People don't give a shit about you. They sure as fuck want to tell you how to live and how to look and how to work, though.
Yeah, that's spot on. The message is pretty consistently that I am not allowed to feel pleasure unless I look a certain way, or I'm not allowed to have clients or to have money or success unless I feel a certain way in my body, or I inhabit my body, or I share my body in ways that fits into these societal standards. And this is not a rhetoric that anyone's unfamiliar with. But these are examples that felt very profound when I started examining this invisible recognition inside of myself, and that Eric could see in me that felt part of this unconscious programming that steals my joy, steals my presence.
I felt the same thing, though, with money and status. And I'm not allowed to host a woman or to be her dom unless I made more money, unless I had a certain kind of car or had a certain status or a certain physique. I think it's especially prevalent with material things. And that was something that I really had to come to terms with. Wait, did I have these contracts in the status game? This unconscious programming is abusive by definition. Anything that has unconscious power over you is not considering your well-being. And in such, it's going to abuse you if you stay perpetually under it. And most everyone, if they don't examine their unconscious programming within which they live, in their religion, in their society, in their culture, they're going to be abused by it.
Yeah, even in workplace dynamics or family dynamics, how many women do we sense or see carrying the emotional labor or the physical labor for an entire team? How we can be conditioned to manage everyone's feelings and remember all the special events and the birthdays and the personal details, and smoothing over or anticipating everyone's needs. But that unconscious programming really extracts the value. A succubus energy never really gives any credit or compensation.
Women are the emotional caretakers. They're the memory keepers, like you just were speaking about. And a lot of unconscious expectations around it. What I find is that the real difference between conscious and unconscious programming is consent and consideration. We're both mutually being intentional about the situation. And there's holiness in that, both in the short term and the long term. Conscious dominance considers the long-term well-being. It says, is this sustainable? I ask myself, is this sustainable for Rachael over the long term? Is this sustainable for her to have this capacity? Is she depleting herself? Or is she growing in her capacity? Is this regenerative? Or is this unconscious? And the unconscious programming takes until you burn out, until you break down, until you get sick. And this is why those breakdowns, those sicknesses, don't judge them. They are bringing you the truth. Most women are unconscious subs to the programming that doesn't serve them or take their needs into consideration. They're taught to be accommodating. They're taught to not make waves. They're taught to put everyone else's needs first.
This is what I think is so insidious, that I'm celebrated for those moments, that people really are praising my willingness to abandon myself. As I abandon myself, I'm in the process of keeping them comfortable. And we talk about this through the lens of what it is to be dysfunctional or in an enmeshed relationship, maybe with family or friends or romantic partners. But there's a moment where we can catch ourselves in that cycle where the unconscious programming keeps getting fed by our participation, by our attention to it. So if I never show my pain or I never express my needs and never exert or consider my own boundaries, the people around me never have to grow and they never have to develop the capacity to deal with conflict or discomfort that often comes with actually taking care
Yeah.
of someone else.
I got to stay comfortable.
Yeah,
I
when we
would,
first met.
exactly. I would point that out to you all the time about our relationship. And then also ask you to not be that way with me and to make me uncomfortable. I wanted to grow. And I can't do that if you're just constantly placating or hiding your truth. And so I didn't want you to carry the discomfort all by yourself. I wanted to, at the very least, carry it with you. And to me, when you're holding back, it's not love. And this is the danger, especially with women who are naturally submissive. Just like there's unconscious dominance, there's also unconscious submission. And in order to have conscious dominance, you need to call your woman into conscious submission and out of unconscious submission. Because women are praised everywhere for being unconscious subs.
Coming back to the world of guilt, I was thinking through the way that it was lost on me. I understood guilt as something that happened if you did something that was massively wrong or could feel that in your soul or something more dramatic. I was never experiencing guilt until I was in this relationship. And I experienced guilt less as an emotion and more of an awareness of the stories that are behind the guilt and the various ways that I can have that be in my experience. The guilt is really a way of feeling into my inability to receive. And even as a master teacher of receptivity to my clients and doing this for over 20 years, I'm great at receiving sex and pleasure and massage and foods and gifts and compliments and things that I practice that feel really natural to me. But one of the number one lessons I teach people and that I have had to learn myself is that when someone gives me a compliment, to start by saying thank you. Maybe secondly, to say, I received that fully. That feels really good to hear. That made my day. I appreciate your feedback, or whatever that may be, to just acknowledge deeper instead of the habit I was in previously, which was to deflect it back to the other person. But beyond that moment, I first recognized guilt, not just as an emotion, but as a habit or a practice, that I started seeing guilt as evidence of the invisible contract that was somewhere in there that I've made somewhere along the way with myself or with him or with society, with my family system or anything in my past. The guilt can really be something that points me back towards something in my past, something that I can recognize. It's not just an emotion, but an experience in my programming for me to get more data about myself.
The big difference between conscious dominance is that I do not want your service or your kindness or your love from guilt or from obligation. I want you to receive my care so that you can show up fully in your feminine and your openness and your receptivity, and not just to me, but to the whole world. And that can only happen when you're not depleted from carrying everyone else's emotional labor, when you're not depleted from managing everyone else's shit and everyone else's comfort. I want you to have more capacity for intimacy for yourself, more capacity for creativity. You have more capacity for kindness. You have more presence. And you have a presence that actually nourishes our relationship just naturally. It's an overflow. You're devoted towards prioritizing our relationship. And it feels fucking amazing.
Yeah, the guilt shows me where I'm still serving that unconscious programming, as I said before, and one that is outside of my conscious choice. So I'm recognizing in myself that it doesn't feel congruent. It's not matching the contract that I signed up for. And I'm like, fuck that contract. Let me start over. So I really like to think, less about guilt as an emotion and more as a symptom that I want to examine by asking, I feel guilty because I'm feeling what emotion? This is a practice that's inside of Arosha's Mudroom that is a self-study course, and there's links to all of that in all of our media. But that course is really where we teach about how to start examining and understanding our emotions. This question to really look and see if some emotions may be tricking us to think that we're having an emotional experience when in fact we're experiencing almost a diversion or a symptom or a distraction from something helps us marinate in what we're actually feeling and going deeper to explore what's underneath that with guilt, for example. What emotion am I actually feeling? I feel guilt because I'm feeling insecure or afraid. There have been moments with Eric where I recognize that I am feeling grief. And it's much more accurate to say that I feel grief than that I'm feeling guilt because I am used to doing all this cooking or errands or our logistics in our life when I was solo. And there's a grief that I don't contribute in those ways anymore, and that he has taken on so much of that responsibility. Things I used to be really good at, and now those skills are applicable and something I get to share only on occasion. And that feels correct for me. It feels wonderful in that way. I'm relieved and I'm in pleasure to have that new contract that we agreed to consciously together. But instead of the grief of the story that I used to be this way or that way, it has been really helpful for me to be able to be in the now and really honor, oh, I'm feeling something that is that of death or is that of regeneration or something has come anew. And we get to honor a part of us that died, perhaps. And so exploring, am I bored? Do I feel guilt because I'm just sitting here not feeling useful? Which is a huge part of the journey of having someone who is so willing to come be more in the action of life, and that my job is to be receptive in life. To feel guilty, I got to ask myself, do I just feel worthless? Am I in the habit of being productive? And in that way, I can understand that this emotion is showing up for me in another way. And I can really start to see that guilt could be more of a habit that I've gotten myself used to. And that every time someone does something for me, I feel that obligation or that I need to pay them back or somehow be contributing. And so therefore, that guilt is part of this habitual cycle that keeps me in a loop of being disempowered and ultimately untrue to myself. And giving from that place of obligation, as Eric has taught me, doesn't feel as good for the receiver.
So true. I think you can start recognizing where your invisible contracts are by paying attention to where you feel guilty for receiving or for resting.
Damn, that rings a loud bell inside of me.
Where do you feel selfish for having preferences?
So spot on.
Where do you automatically calculate how you're going to pay back that person with kindness or favors? Where do you minimize your own needs to keep others safe or comfortable? Where are you fine when you're actually really struggling? These are all places where you have unconscious contracts, where you're unconsciously a sub.
You said something about automatically calculating, and I think that recently I've been really sensing in myself, when am I getting into a strategy brain versus in a place of receptivity? And I can feel in my body, it's very visceral when I'm in strategy rather than in a place of observation. And I guess just thinking about the word guilty, it's really occurring to me that means guilty. Guilty as charged. It's funny because we just say this word and I've heard it so many times, but guilty means I admit that's true for me. And I'm over here saying, yes, yes, all those things you just listed off. I just wanted to be like, spot on, guilty, guilty. And it's funny to think about it because it's an admission. And as I am admitting, I'm actually letting something in the door. I'm saying, yes, come in. I am selfish. I am experiencing this moment in a place where I am fully receiving without giving. And I am fully relaxed while that person over there is working really hard. And this feels imbalanced, and this is new to me, and this is triggering, this is uncomfortable. And we've talked about that so much, the way that we are leaning into the discomfort and that this can feel awkward. But can I deal with that? Can I be awkward? Can I be uncomfortable? Can I even sit there in the emotion or the story of guilt? Can I marinate here and just allow it and admit it? Because I can say from the other side of practicing that for years, it's glorious luxuriating in bed in the beautiful sunshine where Eric asked me to get comfortable while he makes us a cocktail or a mocktail or whatever we're having that day. And I get to watch him and his beautiful body and the way the light shifts across the room and the texture of the covers on my skin, and I get to receive it. And now that feels like my correct place. It feels like home to me. It is getting more and more to where I am hesitating almost not at all to just go be in that place of receptivity, of delight. It's really been a big change for me to notice that it's these small moments done over the course of time that I'm recognizing less and less guilt, less and less obligation, and much more peace and relaxation, a softness literally in my belly, but in like the soul of my belly, of that place of my power that feels more relaxed. I had a dear friend who is an advisor to me in my company. And this was about a decade ago. He recommended that I actually write down for an entire week every single thing that I did in a day, whether it was a task for work or for another person, every little phone call, every email, every time I chose an outfit for myself, put my makeup on, made my food, prepped food, went shopping, made decisions. And in a way, it was like making a budget to look at how I spend, or I've heard that people want to track your food if you have food sensitivities to see what you eat. I began to think of myself through the week as I was calculating, almost like I was inside of my own reality TV show, because I don't think I ever had realized with a place of conscious admission how much I did in a week, how much I did in a day. So this game I started to play in my head at the time was for me to start to write down what I did and why did I do it like this, as if I was having an observer. And that came in handy when I met Eric, because then when he was there and he was actually observing me. So when we first got together, I still had no idea how much I did in the background, because once I realized, especially with another person in my sphere, how much I would do in the shower, the ruminating, the thinking, the deciding. And so he would constantly say, if you're doing all this stuff in the background without telling me, how will I ever know? How will I ever know that's something to add to our list? So I'm narrating it as if I'm on some sort of day in the life YouTube reality TV show, thinking, why do I do every single thing that I do? And catching myself not only in these productivity hacks and life hacks that were evident, but also these more insidious ones. I do this thing this way because I was told to do this by society, because my first boyfriend liked it like this. Asking myself, I do this, and why do I do that? Where did I get that idea from? It really helped me be gentle over the course of time to notice the sort of trickle-down effect and how much of this I was doing because I was in fear, because I wanted to be accepted, because of my insecurity, because I had this pervasive sense of needing to owe somebody something. And whoever that may be, it could be a complete stranger or something I heard, started to make me aware of my decision-making process ultimately. And letting that be open and vulnerable and letting that be in the narrative and letting Eric hold that with me. Ultimately now to hand that forward into that domain of our relationship, this bigger picture where Eric could witness me in that and hold that with me. It was powerful. Not that he had to take over everything at first, but really that he could just hold me, hold that part of our dynamic, and bring an awareness, an admission of my practice of that, my habit of that, and ultimately bring compassion so we could giggle about it, or that ultimately he could be this essential voice that says to me, reflects to me, does this even matter to you? Or are you just doing this because it's somehow is in your story. It's a loop in your head. It's that habit. And it feels worse if you don't do that. That's where we could really catch some of these little strings and these little parasites of obligation inside of my actions.
Mm. So most of these rules really came from invisible contracts to avoid judgment, to be accepted, to not cause discomfort to someone else later.
Absolutely.
When you're people pleasing unconsciously, you're actually managing other people's emotions. You're doing that instead of expressing your own emotions, and that takes a toll.
It's such a call out. And this is why so many people don't know what it is that we are feeling. I was just talking to a client the other day, and she's actually speaking to a new fellow in her life. And then she started asking a question just to understand or to learn more about him. She wanted to know how he was feeling that day. And his answer was that he had no idea what he was feeling or what he experienced that day. And she reflected to me later privately that in that moment, she really didn't know hers either. And she said that it was a very odd moment of recognizing that they were both in this sort of wounded place and habituated to please others, that they didn't want to actually say what was going on to themselves, much less another person. Ultimately, we're in a place of not knowing ourselves right now. And I think it's powerful what Eric said, that managing other people's emotions is not your responsibility.
I mean, at the end of the day, it just comes down to taking responsibility for things that are yours and not taking responsibility for things that are not yours. Because other people's emotions are not your responsibility.
That seems so simple. It's such a good soundbite, but it goes into that deeper, bigger, more interesting conversation about obligation. Really what it is to take that sort of audit of our life that I was talking about and realize how much we feel obligated to do or to be. And really to start noticing that you don't have to change the behavior, but instead to be in the knowing of what is holding you in that place of the shoulds and the musts and the have tos. I would have never known that it was so deep inside of my own narrative until I actually narrated how I'm navigating different people out loud to Eric, to really see that most of the day I feel like I owe people things and my time and my energy. And then I think that commitment that I had with myself changed. And I definitely recommend this for anyone brave enough to do that for a season or maybe a couple months. I made that commitment to feel into how decisions actually deplete me, because I'm worried about the consequence of the decision. Not to get too geeky on the words, but that word decide has the suffix of CIDE, which is common in
To kill.
it means to kill, but it's common in insecticide and pesticide. And so when we see that word decide, I feel the killing inside of me. And Eric's talked about this so much. We talk about this so much, but the feminine, this way is such a yes energy. It's a building. It's a, I want more. And then the expansion is endless. So it ultimately relieves me to have a decision made, but actually making the decision often is depleting to me. It takes away my life force. So that way that I feel the responsibility of the consequence of the decision that's being made, I'll notice with Eric, he doesn't feel plagued by a decision. He's not at all malicious, but if someone is upset with him or disappointed in him, he's definitely not thinking about it the way that I will sit and ruminate on it for 30 seconds or maybe 30 minutes. And in this way, there's a moment where I can see that clarity of Eric's decision making. And he talks about this like clear is kind from Brene Brown, that deciding energy being something that is in that masculine domain. It builds your energy. You feel, and I notice you feeling much more of that ownership. It clears away, it edits, it prunes, and that feminine energy is more expansive and big. We give them more things to prune. So bringing these micro moments to him, if I was debating in any decision in the day, ruminating or strategizing or getting into the how of something, if I were to bring that to him instead of doing that on my own and churning in the room or in the shower by myself, it always went better. That if there was the slightest stir or any recognition of that disconcerting energy in me, I would bring it to Eric and narrate it out loud to him. Even just the act of doing that and narrating it to him, having him receive me, and to be held in this sort of mutually built moment of what ultimately ended up feeling like a gift. But in the beginning, it just felt like an awkward way for me to say, oh my gosh, I'm having so much in my head right now. I started to notice that my hormones were changing, that I felt more contained. I felt less alone. And it also started to inform Eric more and more about the inner workings of what's actually important to me, what happens in my busy mind when it's trying to constantly untangle all the necklaces of obligation and contracts and potential outcomes and people that I felt like I owed energy to, or any of these moments. And it could just be about what I'm cooking for dinner on a Friday night. It does not have to be big things. This was actually the most exciting part, is that it wasn't the giant things. These were such big catches for me that I could not have done without his support and his encouragement and seership.
You don't automatically owe others your time and energy. You owe yourself your time and energy.
That's been really uncomfortable because I have learned to say no more than ever before. And often that no is coming from you, from the wisdom of you observing me. In the external world, they may not know that's coming from Eric, who is looking out for my long-term well-being. But he's feeling into and saying that no with me, for me, that I can feel in my body when he says that feedback, that it's an immediate softness. It's a puddle, and my spine feels relief. And if for some reason, something that he says no to, where I may feel some resistance or some wavering in there, I then bring that to the conversation and bring that and say, oh, that feels a little sticky. And I might just be really squirmy with that. And I can be squirmy and have him witness me in that squirm, or we can feel into that together. We can go through a little more debate or a little more processing or more holding, or maybe a cry or another story from my past. I just need to recognize and bring forward and clear, almost like the Tetris, the sort of old school way that the buildup starts happening, and then you clear the bottom. And there's like nice soothing music going on in the background that we all love.
Yeah, I think something I found by being with you is really the clarity that women should be in their yes. And I think they're when they're constantly in a deciding place, they want to be in their yes and they want to please, and that's natural. And so that's hard when you're in a deciding place. You can't actually do that. This reminds me of the episode from back where I said that men need to be in their conscious Tom to really be intimate with their no. And I think that's right. So when you decide to cut something off, you're saying no to something. And the more decisions I can make, it is healthy for our dynamic, just from a purely energetic point of view. When you're doing something that's going against the grain of your societal conditioning or programming, it is painful. And so it's really important to know that there is going to be an adjustment period when you're moving from unconscious to conscious. It's going to be painful. And it will register in your body the same way as going against your values when you haven't looked into it, because you're going against the unconscious patterning of society. Because where we make conscious contracts and when we've made unconscious contracts, when we go against either of them, we're going to feel the same way. That's the nature of a contract. It's like we're betraying something. And that's really helpful about embracing triggers, because that's an indicator to audit the trigger, because you can start seeing, oh, wait a second, that trigger is for an unconscious contract. That trigger was for a conscious contract. And you can start discerning which is which. And your body doesn't differentiate the pain, whether it's from an unconscious contract or a conscious contract. It will register the same. And that's why you have to understand the navigation of pain. It's like when you're trying to quit an addiction, it's painful. When I was growing up, I felt guilty about all sex, all masturbation, all sex before marriage. And so if I had any lust at all, any sexuality, any sensuality, I felt guilty about it. I felt guilty about desire to dominate. I felt guilty about wanting to lead. And it all came from my conditioning of growing up in this religion, where I saw all those things like something we had to transcend and we had to leave behind and to negate. And so what happened was when I started down the path of sexuality, I was a mess. I was cheating. I was sprawling through all of it because I had rejected the constraints of my religion, but I didn't have any way of bringing some new form. It was very messy and sloppy. I started realizing, though, wait a second, this cheating thing or this lying thing doesn't feel good. And there's a reason for that. I actually feel guilty about that. Whereas me having a desire to lead in my relationship or be dominant, that's not necessarily something to feel guilty about. And so I started to really parse that out. And that became really meaningful and beautiful. It's still something I deal with. And so I've had to, in my body, really discern between the two. It's actually a daily practice for me to really feel into what exactly are these feelings that's coming in. Is this something that's going against society's expectations, or is this going against my own expectations? And it's an important thing to start assessing where are our values and what do we feel is right and wrong? Is it ours? Is it somatic? Is it in the body? And untangling all this, I literally felt guilty from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. I just lived in a state of guilt. And it's still something that I have to deal with. Untangling the guilt and seeing which part of it was helpful and which part was unhelpful. The most powerful thing for me to navigate all this guilt was when I had full responsibility for my life. And for you, for Rachael, what if all of this was my responsibility? What if everything became my opportunity to assess, even for Rachael, what was a value and not a value? And then I had to start looking past my ego. I had to start seeing where timeless values became helpful. What was most in service to Rachael and what was beneficial to her over the long term might be something that will make us look worse in the short term. It's going to impact my ego or maybe my health. And what's necessary for me to do is to make less money or to do less in the world. Or I'm going to do something that's going to take me down a notch in another way. And that's what true leadership is. You have to be able to navigate whatever is necessary to do, including the cesspool of guilt. And so differentiating these two things is complicated. You can't just take all the guilt as bad, because some of it actually is necessary for you to feel like getting your shit together. That's an important feeling, to feel guilty when you're doing shitty things.
I would say that seeing your guilt as a motivating factor is what you're talking about there, that this can also be problematic when we start to sense that it's the sort of fuel or the motivator or that slippery slope. For example, a person who's a workaholic taking off on a Tuesday and laying in the sun all day, then all of a sudden feeling this overwhelm of guilt, asking, is this actual guilt? Am I doing something wrong or bad or morally incorrect and harmful to self or other? Or am I just doing something new? Am I doing something that I haven't done in a long time? Are we in the newness of something? And if so, that's naturally going to be triggering or activating us in that space. Be a badass and stop being a lazy ass at times. Yes, we need that. And so being able to feel the taste or the texture of that guilt, being able to navigate the nuance is deeply part of that human experience.
It really ties into these words that we hear a lot now about enmeshment, codependency. And another way of saying it is that they are unconscious.
Mm.
That's why you're being unconsciously dominated when you're enmeshed. And so to know the difference between enmeshment, codependency, and conscious dominant relationship is really important. If they're dominating you and caring about your long-term benefit, that's conscious dominance. That's somebody who's considering you. I'm considering your well-being over the long term. I have your interest in mind.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it can look dependent on the surface, of course, because we're practicing this model of breaking the habit of being constantly in give mode. And we may need to go backwards. That's the RX, the retrograde in our DSRX model. Eric really pulled me back from being a sub to body image standards, to my workout, to my training, to my family, to my lifestyle, to my work, to my clients, all to be able to say that I was being unconsciously submissive. And it was powerful to recognize and absolutely agree with him.
Yeah. And what's interesting is noticing the games that we're playing. Notice the contracts. Notice the places that we have unconscious relationships where we're looking for validation. A lot of men are as guilty as women of these very same things. They're caught up in their own body image, their own need for surgeries or whatever kind of thing to fit the standards that are out there. So it's not just a feminine thing. I see this as very cultural. You're trying to fit into a standard that's ambiguous at best. And whenever there's an ambiguous Dom, that ambiguous Dom doesn't give a shit about your well-being.
And we don't even know that we're doing it.
Yeah. I have to bring back the David Foster Wallace, the author and the writer who gave that commencement speech. This is Water is the name of it. I think it's a really important metaphor to make. I'm just going to say it quickly here, but there's two fish that were swimming along. Another older fish came by and asked those two fish, "How's the water?" And the one fish said, "Fine." And then they kept going. And then the one fish said to the other fish, "What's water?" And this idea that we don't even know the culture that we're in. We don't even know the paradigm that we're in. We don't even know what we're dealing with. And the triggers will teach you where you are, where you're falling short if you pay attention to them. Guilt will show you. Part of bringing consciousness to something is the proper sequence and an order of operation. The first thing is we need to bring conscious awareness before we can start bringing dominance or correction to any situation. Bring awareness to our life. Bring consciousness to our habits. Bring consciousness to the things that we want to change. You can't change your habit until you are conscious of it.
And as soon as you resist the habit, as soon as you judge it, you're really creating the suffering. We've talked about that so much, and that's really what we're going towards is a word we haven't talked so much about, which is neutrality.
Yeah, the neutrality. Can I not judge myself? Can I just appreciate? Can I be in a place of gratitude? When you're in a bad place, just fucking get to gratitude. It's a simple place. Find something to get into gratitude. Because gratitude in the Rosha mudroom ladder gets you out of the red. It gets you out of the yellow. It gets you out of that fucking hole. Because you can find something to be grateful for. Anything. And it immediately puts you in more of a place of neutrality. Appreciation to me is a very masculine quality. Don't undermine that. It's only when you start being grateful for your life that you can start changing it. You can start moving from it. If you're going to be that biodynamic farmer that I've talked about, you have to actually not do a damn thing for a year. You just have to sit there and look and appreciate and notice. You have to observe it. And I think this is also going along with observing your woman. It's something that I focus a lot on with Rachael, just observe her. And I want to be in a frequency of neutrality with that observation. I need to watch her for a while and be very selective and don't judge her and don't judge myself.
Yeah. Also to be witnessed. It's vulnerable. It can be so erotic to just have someone witnessing. I have a whole art career around this concept. The energy here that we're spending on unconscious programming is energy that we can't spend on conscious growth. It's like a budget. When you're managing everyone else's stuff, as Eric said earlier, can't manage our own evolution. So how can we actually begin this? We started small. It's overwhelming to think about it at first, but if we can pick one invisible contract, one place of obligation to rewrite or to break at a time, maybe it's that you just receive a compliment without deflecting it or even re-engaging. Maybe one of the practices we can do is to let someone carry something, or maybe even dare we ask someone to help us carry something without insisting that we can do it on our own. Maybe it's that we express a preference without immediately adding, but whatever you want is fine, because there's something to recognize the guilt that we may have for taking up space and to take up that space anyway, to feel the guilt anyway, and to know it's going to be there and let it be there, to marinate in it, to feel guilty for laying in the sun and lay there, laying in the sun, feeling uncomfortable with the feelings that you may be feeling, to sit in the guilt and to recognize, are you in the emotion of the guilt? Are you in the story of the guilt? Is the guilt motivating you? Are you actually processing something in the thick of true guilt? Can you practice that conscious discomfort instead of unconscious submission? Then we're actually making progress, if so.
Guilt's when you know you have an obligation. I think that's another phrase that we can live with.
That is so clean and powerful. I'm like processing through so many moments in my life. That's such a good catch.
It's when you have a contract to something, a system, or a person that's more dominant than you. And so you are in a contract. The energy of owing someone else dries up any intimacy. That's also accurate.
That is really.
That is my experience of owing energy. And that's why if you feel like you owe your sex, it's not intimate.
Oh, and if you owe dinner, or if you owe money, or if you owe someone a text back, guilt is there. It's that symptom that tells you where you have those unconscious contracts, where you're unconsciously submissive. And the important thing, though, is to not necessarily get rid of it. It's just to notice it, to feel it and notice it.
Breaking free from unconscious programming is not selfish.
It's one of the most generous things that we can do. It's really when we stop serving these systems that extract or take from us, that we have so much more to give to our conscious relationships, to love itself. When you stop managing everyone else's emotions, you can actually feel your own. When you stop performing that you're fine, you discover who you are and what you're actually feeling.
Yeah. The people who love you, they want your full self, not your performative self. They want you alive. They want your vitality. They don't want you depleted. They want you conscious. They don't want your unconscious submissiveness, the programming that diminishes you. They do. They're not actually in love with you. They're in love with the performance that you are giving them.
Breaking these contracts and these invisible stories inside of us are actually how we find out who we are and that we're not serving everyone else. And that is definitely a person worth meeting, that we've both gotten to meet a whole nother side of each other without that in our life. And as we continue with the program or the experience of wanting to take care of someone else, to protect them from a unsavory or uncomfortable moment, we are indeed keeping them small. We are indeed keeping them from knowing a side of themselves and finding their own inner strength and resolve. And in that way, that is a selfish act.
We don't keep each other small. I actually want you a lot bigger and in the expansiveness of your light and your shining. And that's what I'm here for. And it's amazing to receive you in this way that you are. It's amazing. It's been amazing. It's been amazing this entire time. And this is what we do. We help people break free from programming and to step into relationships that actually nourish them. So please join us, join our community.
Feel free to email us anytime. You can reach us at DSRX Studio on Instagram. We have an email button there. You can also DM us or click on the link in bio, of course, to get on our mailing list or get any of the free resources that we have, including the ones over on arosha.art and finding me personally over on @arosha on Instagram.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.